I'll start here. Our tier one, I'm going to say it's a one-man race. Caleb Williams, USC. I think when you can have a Heisman Trophy on your mantle coming into the season, to put anyone else alongside you, again, is disrespectful. But here's my tier 1A. Michael Penix Jr. at Washington, Bo Nix at Oregon, and then Cam Rising and Cam Ward, put together by our enterprising producer, Cam Molina. I know you love those guys. My tier 2, Jaden DeLora at Arizona, DJ Uiagalelei at Oregon State, not Clemson. And then my tier 3, a lot of unproven guys, but guys that I think have a little bit of upside. Shedeur Sanders at Colorado, Dante Moore at UCLA, Drew Pine at Arizona State, who there's a little bit of buzz. He hurt his hamstring in camp. There's a little bit of buzz that we might see a Jaden Rashada renaissance, I guess if we can call that. Really, it's just a first birth for Jaden Rashada, but I still think it's going to be Drew Pine out there in the spring, like what I saw from him. And then TCU transfer, Sam Jackson, still in a competition at Cal, will lean his way. And then same thing with Stanford. Justin Lamson, still like competition, we'll go there. Let's start here, Sam. Does anyone else belong on the tier 1? Are you putting anybody on that pedestal with Caleb Williams?
No, I think that's fair. I think the way you put it, I can't argue with your points that when you win the Heisman Trophy, you deserve to be in a class of your own and you're a returnee. So Caleb clearly is that. But when you look at the top of this league and the quarterbacks, it's mind-boggling how good this Pac-12 is going to be and how much fun it's going to be this year. Because you got Michael Penix, who had a fantastic season at Washington last year. You got Bo Nix, who had a fantastic season at Oregon. You had Cam Rising, who helped Utah get to the Pac-12 championship. And then Cam Ward, one of my personal favorites, of the former Incarnate Word quarterback who had a solid year last season to start at Washington State. And he's going to have a new offensive coordinator. But this is a really talented group of guys. And so this is what makes it like, who's going to be your first team all Pac-12 guy at the end of the year? Is it still going to be Caleb? Is somebody else going to knock him off? And then who's going to be the second team? Like there's so many guys on this list at the top that it's hard to pick which one's going to emerge from the heap.
It's kind of amazing. Like for all the talent that we have, like you look down the list, Caleb Williams, dog. Michael Penix Jr., dog. Bo Nix, dog. Cam Rising, 2-time Pac-12 champion, dog. Obviously, Cam Ward, proven. He's done it. Jaden DeLora, done it at 2 different schools, and I think he's still got a ways to go. DJ, I mean, we'll see. you look at the rest of these guys. There's a lot of upside. Shedeur Sanders. We've talked about him a lot on this pod. The arm talent is pretty obvious. Dante Moore, 5-star true freshman. I'm sure there'll be some bumpy rides, but I think he's going to be a guy that makes a bunch of plays for Chip Kelly down there if he can secure that job. Drew Pine, I think, can make some plays for you. The last 2 are really the only guys that I'm like, we'll see. Do you see any upside with those guys? I mean, you've seen a little bit more of Sam Jackson at TCU, a guy who played in the state of Texas. If he wins that job, you got Jake Spavital out there at the OC gig coming over there from Texas State. Is there an upside there at Cal? The Jake Spavital, Justin Wilcox marriage?
Yeah, no doubt. I think so. I mean, Spavital's been there before at Cal, and they had a really good offense when he was there. I think he was there under Sonny Dykes when Dykes was the coach, and they were able to put some points on the board. So I think Spav's, his coaching acumen is really not much of an issue. Like, he's a good offensive football coach.
Yes.
It's, head coach, it didn't work out at Texas State. There was a lot of different issues, but the pairing of him and Sam Jackson, who is got tons of physical talent. Like Jackson, you watch him run the ball, he's electric. We were talking about Jalen Milroe earlier in the SEC. Sam Jackson's got that kind of juice as a runner. But also you talked to Garrett Riley last year, the Clemson OC who was at TCU. Him and Sonny were raving about how well Sam Jackson throws the ball. And so if he ends up getting this job, Fernando Mendoza, Ben Finley, is still battling for this as well. But if Sam ends up getting this job, the combination of what Jake does offensively and Sam Jackson's physical talent, I think there is a really high ceiling there. I think there's a lot of potential because this is a guy who again, was part of a team that went to a national title game. So he's been and seen some really good competition in the Big 12. He hasn't had to play as much, but he's practiced against some really high end competition. So I think there's a lot of potential for Sam Jackson here to break out if he nails his job down.
Sam, I'm pretty mad at Heisman voters. I feel like they've well earned it. There's too many voters for the start, just for the record. I mean, listen, as much as we talked about Stetson Bennett and not wanting to disrespect him, was the 4th or 5th best player on Georgia's team last year, and we're going to call this man a Heisman finalist. Like, come on, guys. Come on now. Here's the deal with Caleb is we've had more returning Heisman winners than you would think if you start looking back. But they're coming in with an unfair situation for a couple reasons. One, when you lose a game, people blame you if you're the quarterback, despite the fact that Caleb is not going to be the reason why they lose any games this year. I can confidently say. I think if USC loses games this year, listen, not to point the finger and play the blame game. There's lots of plays. More likely going to be the 11 guys on the other side of the ball are the reasons why USC trips up. So you have that, if they go 10-2 this year and Caleb has, as good a numbers as he does last year, well, it's going to be, people are going to dock him unfairly, I would argue. Secondly, if you're a returning Heisman winner, if you're still the best player in the country coming back, and Bryce Young dealt with this last year. Bryce Young, I think, was better than he was last year. But if your numbers are not what they are going to be, the voters are going to knock you. And Bryce is sort of complicated. He wasn't on my ballot. I think the injuries and that played a part in it. But ultimately, Caleb, if he's going to repeat as a Heisman winner, he's going to have to surpass his own number, because if he doesn't surpass his own numbers, people are just going to knock him and not vote for him solely for that reason. Again, there's got to be fewer Heisman voters. I really get frustrated every year. I get actually mad about it. I need to calm down. There's more important things in life. But man, it's very frustrating. And I think he's going to get unfairly blamed for losses. What do you make of the upset? I mean, of the repeat chances that he's got, and what do you make of my complaints with Heisman voters here?
I think ultimately it comes down to team success. Let's be honest, that's the way this award goes. And Caleb Williams' chances hinge upon them getting to the playoff. They've got to win the Pac-12. They got to get to the playoff. They probably have to go 12-1 for him to get it. Even if he is the best player in college football. I agree with you generally on that. We're probably a little bit too deep of a list of Heisman voters. I understand, though, wanting to have the regional representation. I think it is important to have representation from across the country, not just, everybody concentrated in SEC country. You got to have some folks on the West Coast. You got to have folks in the South. You got to have folks in the North and Northeast.
You can have that, though. Let's go 150 voters, not 950. Right. It's insane.
But I think it's once Ndamukong Suh finished behind Colt McCoy in the 2009 Heisman voting, I kind of lost hope for it. Because we all saw how good Ndamukong was, and we all saw what he did to Colt McCoy in the Big 12 championship game in 2009.
Ragdoll is the term that I hear thrown about.
Yeah, actually, I think when I talked to Ndamukong a few years ago about this, he said I thrashed him, and I love that.
Accurate.
Said he gave him a good thrashing, which he did. But yeah, it's kind of like the MVP in pro sports. It's the best player on a really good team is essentially the way we go with this thing. Is that the way it should be? I guess that's up for everybody else's interpretation. I try to go best player. I do lament the lack of defensive players that we have on it, and the lack of receivers sometimes that we have on it. Mm-hmm. So I think your general beef is legit, but I just don't know. I don't know college football the way we are. I don't know if we're changing it anytime soon.
Let's close out the Pac-12 like this. You look at that Tier 1A that I have: Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, Cam Rising, Cam Ward. Penix Jr., I think, has the best arm talent of any of those guys, where he makes some throws where you're just like, oh my gosh, the 20-yard deep out from the opposite hash. You're just like, dude, what? Bo Nix has had a weird career. I'm curious what the switch from Kenny Dillingham to Will Stein does out there. We'll see. Cam Rising doesn't have, the same sort of eye-popping numbers just because that's how Utah plays football. Cam Ward, was he underwhelming last year? I don't know. I think maybe the hype was a little too much for him, maybe. But when you look at these four guys, who do you like to ascend to that tier one? And I think one of those four guys, quite frankly, gets a ticket to New York City. Who do you like to ascend, and who are you kind of raising an eyebrow at before you're like, are we sure this guy is going to set the world on fire this year?
Yeah, Bo Nix is the guy that I would put my money on ascending into the top. And that's no disrespect to Michael Penix, who I think is terrific, but I do like the Will Stein hire at Oregon, and I do think he did some great work with Frank Harris at UTSA, who we'll talk about later as we get into the Group of Five. But I think that could be a really good marriage there. And Bo's just got a ton of experience, and he's seen it all. He's seen it all in the SEC. He's now seen it all in the Pac-12, and that experience. And he just looked like a new guy, a different guy out west last year. And I think building upon that this year could help him break into that tier one and could help Oregon in a big way. Of the guys that I will be honest, as much as I love Cam Ward, I was surprised you included him with this group because I do think he's super talented, and I do think he's deserving a lot of accolades. But we probably did hype him a little bit because I think we do look for who the next guy is, and he came up. He had such a terrific career at Incarnate Word, and you're looking for who's that guy who's going to move up to the Power 5 level and do something big. And he had a really ready-made situation with Eric Morris, who was his offensive coordinator, and his head coach. Who was also his head coach at Incarnate Word. And so that comfort level is not going to be there anymore because Eric, of course, took the head coaching job at UNT. So I think Cam is still super talented. Would I put him in that group with all those guys at this moment? Maybe not. I think he's probably in between. He's not. I wouldn't put him with all those tier 3 guys for sure. He's above those guys, but I also don't know if he's on the level with the rest of the other tier 1A guys.
I think the one thing we should talk about with Bo Nix is if you are in New York City or you are in Dallas, Texas, there are some giant Bo Nix billboards that have popped up in the city. Now, here's where I think we get mixed up. This is a quote unquote Heisman campaign. Okay. I don't think this has anything to do with Heisman votes or anything like that. I think it's just simply we're on the West Coast. The rest of y'all need to know who this dude is. So is it going to help him win the Heisman Trophy? I don't think so. Does it help Oregon's brand? I think so. Sam, my hot take is that I think these billboards and these campaigns, if you do them in the right way, there's room to be, there's a fair question about whether or not you should take some of these things online rather than just putting up a giant billboard of Bo Nix throwing a ball at your face. But I actually think these help the program if you are specifically a program like Oregon that people in Texas might not watch, people on the East Coast might not watch and say, hey, there's a giant guy here. You haven't seen him. You should probably check him out. I think there's a level of curiosity there. I actually think these are good ideas. Where do you stand on the Hooked on Bonix Heisman campaign here?
It's brand awareness, baby. We're in the NIL era, man. You got to build your brand. Okay. I'm all for getting your name out there. There's nothing wrong with that. And like you said, awareness for these West Coast teams, especially guess what? Because it won't be Bo Nix, but Oregon will be playing teams in East Coast time zones before too long. So probably good for the East Coast people to get informed about West Coast football because they're going to be seeing a lot more of them in starting in 2024.